Coming up on This Week in Work. Is the British attitude to work quietly killing innovation? One writer says yes and claims it's the reason American businesses are 5 times more successful. Are we too relaxed as Brits to compete with the American dream? Or have we finally figured out that success isn't worth the burnout?
Recession fears have continued to grow this week, so we'll be looking at some new research on what actually motivates people during an economic crisis. And spoiler alert, it's not pay rises.
And later in the workplace surgery, one listener asks, why do so many people quit rather than challenge toxic culture, even when they've got nothing to lose? We're going to explore the psychology behind it and ask whether unions could actually help make speaking up feel safer.
And to lighten the load, it's time for another round of corporate buzzword bingo. This week's offenders include pre-wire the meeting, swim lane violation, and the classic, let's take this offline, shall we?
This is Truth, Lies and Work, the award-winning podcast where behavioural science meets workplace culture. Brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals.
My name is Leanne. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist.
And my name is Alan. I'm a business owner.
And together we help organisations build amazing workplace cultures. Let's dive straight into this week's episode after a very quick message from our sponsors.
Welcome back. It's Leanne's favourite time of the week. It's time for the news roundup.
Cue the jingle out.
Jingle being cued.
I've got a new game. It's not a new game, actually. It's an old game. Corporate buzzword bingo.
Okay.
We actually played this on the podcast probably 2 years ago
Really?
now.
Was it 2
getting
years?
on for, yeah. So it's been long enough that we've had a new wave of workplace jargon coming in. So we'll circle back to that and pivot like it's 2022.
Oh, it's horrible.
I will be honest, I've completely ripped off a post I saw on LinkedIn from Christine Armstrong, plus a few brilliant suggestions in the comments from Tim Cook and Sean Jackson. So thank you to you all. You've given us a brand new bingo board. Are you ready, Al?
I'm ready. Hit me.
I'm going to throw out some phrases. You tell me what you think they mean, and then we'll go through the actual definitions, or at least what people think they are.
Okay, go ahead.
Shall we double click on that?
Oh, God. Oh, I'm cringing so bad. Double click. Commit to it, maybe?
Can't close. Apparently it means let's explore that in more depth. Let's double click on that. It does sound a bit weird, and also I'll be honest, and I'm not sure if there's any other geriatric millennials or Gen Xers that are with me, but do you remember American Pie? And they talked about double clicking your own mouse. Something very different.
I don't remember that.
There'll be some people out there that will know. Drop me a message and just say, I know.
Was that the one time at band camp? Is
Yeah.
that American Pie? Okay. Yeah. Long time since I've seen that.
Anyway. Phrase 2, precision question.
It would be a cutting question or something like rather than ask you, what are you doing? I might say to you, what are you doing right this minute?
Yeah, but why would my
Okay then.
Yes. No. Yes, but why might we ask a precision question?
Oh, to get a precision answer? I don't know.
So I think this is coming from like prompt language, like ChatGPT. The more of a precise question, the more, I guess, accurate detail you're going to get. The idea is that if we ask precision questions, we're going to speed up the decision-making process and cut the waffle.
Oh, I see. Right. Which we've not done over the last 90 seconds.
No, absolutely not.
Right. Okay. So a precision question would be to get straight to the point and one shot if we're going to use the LLM.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So.
Right. Okay. Still hate it.
Yeah, absolutely awful. Phase 3, pre-wire the meeting.
Oh, just please stop coming up with these. Say it again.
Pre-wire the meeting.
Oh, is that just where you prepare for it, or you perhaps have a pre-meeting before the meeting?
Kind of, yeah. Apparently, it's checking in with key people before the meeting to make sure that they're on board, or at least aren't going to blow stuff up. Which doesn't really make sense why you'd pre-wire it, because it sounds like you're making a bomb or something.
You can't say that word. Not on the airwaves.
Sorry. Number 4, this one actually made me a bit sick to my stomach. Swim lane violation.
Oh, God. Is this where someone's, let's say that they are a designer and they try and get involved in the product planning decisions and they're like, no, you should stay in your lane. That's a swim lane violation.
Exactly.
Oh, good God.
Stay in your lane.
If you're listening to this and you found yourself using some of these, then a little top tip would be to go outside and sit in the middle of a motorway.
You can't say that either.
Can't say that either. No, don't do that. Don't try that.
I think I've got one more for you. N+1 thinking.
Okay, right. I know from database querying that N+1 is when you have, you essentially do duplicate queries. So N+1 thinking, I would think would be something like there's lots of people thinking about the same problem, and it's not helping because there's just duplicating it.
Well, it's supposed to mean, that makes sense, but it's supposed to mean thinking one step ahead. So like what comes next?
Oh, maybe. Maybe that could. I only know N+1 from that very specific thing, so that could be what N+1 means. If you're a professor in N+1ing and you're listening, then just tell us what N+1 actually means.
I've got a few more actually.
Oh, God.
These are quite obvious. Vanilla.
When will this end?
So vanilla is just kind of something that's a bit plain, boring, basic.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very vanilla.
You're a vanilla podcaster. Yep, I get it.
Mm-hmm. A holistic approach.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which basically means that we don't really know what we're doing, but we'll be fine. We'll wing it. Let's take this offline. And as one of the comments said, I think this was actually maybe from Sean. It was like, no thanks, Sandra. I'd rather sort this out now. It's...
What does take it offline? Does it mean we have a face-to-face?
I think it's when, things start to get a bit heated in a Zoom meeting.
Right.
I've heard lots of people, like on socials, they'll like record their boss or someone in the meeting will go, should we take this offline? Or let's take that offline. As in that I don't want to have this confrontational conversation in front of everybody. Or I'm probably going to tell you to offline, but I don't want to do that in front of everybody else. So yeah, there you go. That's the latest corporate lingo, which is really quite uncomfortable. I did some light research to see why jargon pops up so often. And apparently one of the main reasons is because when people feel insecure or want to sound more important, they'll tend to use kind of this corporate jargon to be kind of in group. I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's what some research said. The Neuro Leadership Institute found that jargon-heavy communication, however, does reduce clarity and make leaders seem less authentic and just a bit icky, I think, to pull in another little buzzword. I know, what do you think? Harmless, Al, or just plain wrong?
Plain wrong. Anyone who uses like jargon or complicated words, we both know someone who we're obviously not going to mention, someone who's no longer in our circle, who tends to use long words to make themselves look quite clever. And we just know that it makes them look really stupid because they often use the word in the wrong way. Leanne's just thinking now. I'll tell you offline. Let's take this offline.
Go off camera.
No, because if it gets caught and I forget to cut it out, then that will be a disaster.
I think it is.
You will. I'll tell you afterwards. I'm not with any of this. I think just plain speak. If you're that sort of what's the word when you're not very confident? Unconfident, disconfident. There's a proper word for it. You're lacking in confidence that much. It's going really well. Well, if you're lacking in confidence that much, then don't go down this road of using any other words. Just be plain and simple. Some of the cleverest people I know use the simplest words.
So before we take it offline so I can understand who Al is talking about, let's move on to you, Al. What have you seen this week?
Well, I came across this maybe potentially divisive LinkedIn post this week. A guy called Tom Scourfield. He's a British ghostwriter with American clients. First of all, he wrote in like Fortune magazine or something, but I had to pay £1 to get online, to read it online. She was like, no. So I just Googled the title and he actually wrote the whole thing on LinkedIn anyway. So so basically he's got these American clients. He's British, got these American clients, and he sees the two countries, Britain and the US, as having totally different approaches to work. So Tom suggests that the UK will never catch up to America's startup ecosystem because there are 5 differences in mindset. So I'll go through these 5, see what you think, Lee. So the first one is schlep blindness. Now, this is a term coined by Y Combinator's Paul Graham. If you like Y Combinator, you're going to love this Thursday because we've got a Y Combinator business coming up called Post Hog. Anyway, and this guy will probably know Paul Graham. Anyway, I digress. According to Tom, Americans are more willing to tackle boring problems head on, whereas us Brits tend to spot flaws and reasons not to do something boring before we've even started it. So he suggests that the British are more likely to put something off.
Sorry, before you carry on, is Tom American?
No, Tom's British.
Oh, right, okay.
Tom's British. He's looking at and he's comparing the British to his clients in America. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, obviously, as you're saying, is that this schlep blindness is that you go, oh well, I'm not going to do that because it's just really boring and doesn't look like it's going to be worth it. But as Tom points out, opportunity is on the other side of boring work. I don't know whether that's his or maybe Paul Graham's phrase, but it's a cool phrase. I like that. So that was the first one. The second one is networking. Because so in America, reaching out to complete strangers, now this is Tom's words as well, I wouldn't use the word reaching out, for coffee is apparently perfectly standard practice. But in Britain, we tend to build our circles through existing connections like school, family, colleagues, that kind of thing. So as Tom puts it, in London, talking to strangers is illegal, which is a bit of an exaggeration. But
it's more of a London thing, to be honest.
Yeah, Tom, go to Manchester. Mm-hmm. Everyone chats to people in Manchester. If a Mancunian or a Northerner goes to London, they can have a bad time because they're like, hey, what book are you reading? And then just turn around and look at you as if you just taking a poo in their hand. Anyway, going back to Tom. So the networking, he says that Americans are much more likely to network. The third reason he said was execution versus perfection. Americans apparently are more likely to test ideas quickly as possible, whereas us Brits might have a bit more pride of ownership over ideas, want them to be polished before launching. I don't know if that's necessarily an American versus British thing, but certainly I know a lot of people who are like, no. We'll get the website up and running, we'll get the business cards, we'll set the limited company up before we've even spoken to one single customer. The American approach is very much done beats perfect, which, according to Tom, which obviously is probably quite a good way to get quickly to somewhere. That said, I don't know. Is there more pride in what you ship in the UK? I don't know. Maybe we're more sensitive to negative feedback, perhaps. The fourth one is there's a comfort factor. So the UK sort of normalizes striving for comfort at work, avoiding confrontation, whereas American entrepreneurs apparently embrace challenge and high-pressure situations more readily. He even points out that New York's GDP is supposedly 3 times the size of London's, which he says is linked to this willingness to embrace discomfort. And finally, he argues we're playing entirely different games because British culture, at work particularly, optimizes for stability, respectability, whereas American entrepreneurial culture aims for what he calls outsized impact. Tom himself obviously says that it's about being able to get what you want out of life and knowing what it takes to make it happen. We've not even started on Europe. Tom's not done any kind of I know that I've seen on Twitter quite a lot. The US can't cope with Europe, with mainland Europe. Like, what do you mean you're going for coffee at 11 o'clock? What do you mean you're having dinner in Spain at 10:30 p.m.? You've got work the next morning.
What do you mean you're having August off?
Yeah, exactly. One of the best things, we used to live in Spain. We lived there for about 5 years. One of the best things is in August, you go to like shops and like really big prestigious shops. You have a handwritten note saying, we're off for a month. We're at the beach. Don't care. So, so there you go. So that's what Tom sees as the difference. Any of those resonate, Lee?
There's definitely different attitudes towards work. There's different work culture. To say that it stifles innovation, I don't know. Is it not a bit of an oversimplification? Because it's not like we haven't invented stuff. Like the internet, that was us.
Tim Berners-Lee, yeah.
Pretty innovative.
We invented penicillin. We invented the locomotive.
Yeah, Concorde. We won that race.
Yeah, stick it to you French. Actually, we did it with the French, I think, in that.
Yeah, no, we did. We stick it to the Americans and the Russians. Yeah, no, the French. We did it together. Okay,
Leanne, what else have you seen this week?
Well, speaking of a large nation causing global instability, there has been a bit of a pickle the last 10 days or so. Not going to talk about it. But global recession is a word that's been thrown around. It is escalating in terms of possibility, probability. But my more interest is what happens to the people when there's an economic crisis, and how do we motivate our teams when it all just feels like we're all kind of bracing ourselves for impact. So I came across a bit of research published in 2024 asking what really motivates employees in an economic crisis. So yeah, pretty timely. It was published by the Journal of Occupational and Organizational Psychology, and the study looked at employee motivation during the prolonged economic crisis in Greece, specifically in its banking sector, which was one of the hardest hit industries at the time. So the researchers surveyed 328 employees to understand what really kept them going during years of financial chaos and job insecurity. And here's the standout finding. Non-financial incentives were the most powerful motivators.
Interesting.
More than money, more than job security. So we're talking things like recognition that we talked about last week, Al, empowerment, opportunities for advancement. Employees reported that being trusted to make decisions, appreciated for their contributions, and offered a path to grow made a bigger difference to their motivation than financial rewards alone. The researchers used structural equation modelling, which is just a fancy way of saying they looked at the data, and linked motivation not just to individual feelings, but to actual job performance and organizational effectiveness. And this is the thing we don't talk about enough when we see these things on LinkedIn. It's all about the impact on performance and effectiveness. You know, I might not be as hustly as my American counterpart, but am I equally high performing and effective? That is the important question. So what was found clear in this study was that motivated employees didn't just feel better, they worked better, and that had a measurable impact on how well the business performed. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that money doesn't matter. Of course it does, especially now when inflation is still high and wage growth is slow. But the takeaway here is that culture can carry you when cash can't. So if you're a leader facing some financial constraints, then the study does offer a clear research-backed strategy. Make sure your people feel seen, valued, and give them some control over how they work and maybe where they work. Our thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the whole point, isn't it? If you've got control over what you're working on, you enjoy it and it feels worthwhile, there's almost like nothing else you need to do. Like obviously there's 6-7 things you do because that's the RX-7 which Leanne developed. But essentially it's all about the idea of, do you own your work? Like I'm talking about James again. We've got on this Thursday, but such an interesting way to build an organization where everybody owns the project, because they're only tiny teams, 2, 3, 4 people. Everyone owns the project. Everyone knows what they're doing. They've got full control. And weirdly, nobody gets paid any more. Like the team leader in those teams don't get paid more. Everyone gets paid the same. So it just proves your point, I think.
Yeah, it's not the first study that's shown that non-financial rewards can be really impactful on employee performance and motivation and well-being. There is, of course, some limitations to this specific study. It was in Greece. And yes, it was in the financial services. Different industries might see different patterns. But the broader insight is hard to ignore. And the key takeaway really is, when the economy gets tough, how you treat your people matters more than ever.
I love it. Okay, so I think that's wrapping up for today. After this very, very short break, we're back with a hot take from Emma Jamil. Am I saying her name right? Jamil. Emma Jamil. She's an experienced HR professional and coach, and she has got a spicy take. So we'll see you in a second.
Welcome back. As regular listeners will know, every week we ask a workplace expert for their hot take on the world of work. Today's hot take comes from Emma Jamil, an experienced HR professional, coach, and the founder of the HR Big Meet. After 20 years working in HR herself, Emma now helps women in the profession find clarity, confidence, and the courage to build careers that actually work for them, not just the people around them. Her work is also about making space for the real conversations about being overworked, undervalued, and unsure what comes next, and supporting women to take bold, sustainable steps forward. She's down to earth, practical, very funny, and deeply passionate about helping others feel seen and supported in a role that often asks them to hold everything together.
Okay, let's go and join Leanne and Emma Jamil and hear a hot take.
My name is Emma Jamil and I'm the founder of a company called Be Unstoppable. My work is helping women in HR get unstuck and move forward and in their careers fearlessly. And I'm most famous probably before putting out daft stuff on LinkedIn via TikTok, dancing in my living room. But really what I'm doing is having a go at some of the things that I've experienced and I still observe in the workplace, just in a humorous way. But aside from that, my work with women in HR, my event, the HR Big Meet, they'd be the things that probably people know me most for.
Let's dive straight in, Emma. What is your hot take?
My hot take is, if your business as usual is making people sick or cry or unhappy, then your business as usual is the problem. This hot take is born from my work both as a HR professional, so I've been in HR my whole career, and also the work that I do these days supporting women in HR. So women in HR come to me for coaching, and a lot of the time they have they're dealing with a kind of lack of confidence because for their whole career they've been told really they don't know what they're talking about. Everyone knows HR. HR's not that hard, And when they have reached out for help, which they do sometimes, believe me, it takes a long time before they do. They've been told, well, this is just how it is. HR is just a tough gig. Working here in this organisation, we work at pace. We're doing all this stuff. We're growing at pace. And so if you can't cope, then there must be something wrong with you, and it's you that needs to do something about it. So my hot take really is born from that frustration that what I have observed in my profession, what I observe now is that people who say how it really is in their organisations, people who ask for help, are often sidelined or pigeonholed or put into a bracket of they can't cope, or they're difficult, or they can't hack it, and the problem is with them. And what I'm saying is, no, I don't think that's the truth. In fact, I know that's not the truth. And your BAU is the problem, because by placing the problem at the door of the person who's coming to you and asking for help, you are probably ignoring the fact that actually that person is pulled in a million directions. They've not been given clear instructions about what you really want from them. They rarely get any feedback. The business actually doesn't have a strategy. Growth isn't a strategy. And they're under-resourced. They don't have the IT systems. You're asking them to do too much work. That's the BAU that they're operating within. And if that is the BAU that they're operating within, then saying that the problem is that they can't cope is completely wrong, and your BAU is the problem.
I guess my question is, and because you've worked in HR for all your career, you would have worked with lots of leaders, high-flying leaders. Are they just a different breed of human? Do they have something else about them, or are they masking their struggles in a way that means they get ahead? What's going on there?
As a HR professional, you're managing behaviour all the time, whether it's a leader or it's a member of a team. And I was like, well, what better way to understand behaviour than neuroscience, like literally what's going on in our brain to create that behaviour. And there was a study that showed that when you give people power over decisions that affect other people, that their brain circuitry switches from like a people-focused circuitry to a getting the task done focused circuitry. So for me, that's really interesting, because I'm like, unless you're a really self-aware leader who understands this is what's going on in your brain, potentially you're becoming completely switched off to the needs of people around you. But anything that then threatens our perception of ourselves, so someone telling us that something that we've done or the way that we've set up our workplace as leaders is impacting on them negatively, we're potentially we're going to be like, well, that's a threat to who I think I am. So the problem can't be me. It must be this other person. So I think I've gone slightly off track actually from your question, which is, are leaders some kind of superhuman? I don't think so. I just think when we're in leadership positions, we become less aware of how the experience of our workplace differs for the other people around us. And that means that we're like, well, we can cope, we can do all this, without appreciating we have the control, we have the knowledge, we know what's coming up down the line. We just have a different experience of the workplace compared to the people that we're managing, not through any ill will of our own, but just because that's how it is as humans. So our job then as leaders is to say, to have the humility and the vulnerability to be able to say, I don't know everything, which is tough, again, because in leadership we're told we're meant to know all the answers. And also to reflect and say, hey, yeah, I know I'm a nice person, but actually some of the ways that I'm being might not be having great outcomes for people, or some of the decisions that I'm making might not be received with the intent that I'm making them. And therefore, what do I need to do? That takes like a level of self-awareness that I don't see often in leadership. And that's going to threaten people listening, I'm sure, because they'll be like, well, I listen. Do you though? Like, I think we overcomplicate stuff, right? So I think what we could, if we were just to simplify it completely, what we would be thinking about is, how do I want other people to experience me? So we would be setting standards for how we want other people to experience their time with us. And in setting those standards, then we'd be reflecting daily, did I meet the standards that I've set for myself? And not just do I think that I've done that, but have I reached out to other people to check in and confirm that they've had the experience of me that I intended? So there is, for me, that's a constant seeking of feedback, and it has to be matched with a willingness to actually listen, because we'll listen to the good stuff. Oh yeah, great. I had a great experience of you. Actually listening to someone when they say to you, actually, this is how I felt as a result of what you were saying. This is what I would have preferred. This is what could have been different for me. Listening to that, taking that in without the defensiveness, and then doing something to change your behavior sounds really simple. But again, because we get our ego gets threatened, it's actually a lot harder in real life. So for me, it does come down to self-awareness. What experience do you want other people to have of you? Checking in with people, and then genuinely listening and not being defensive. I genuinely think coaching it should be essential for anyone in a leadership position. Because coaching gives the space where you can go, and then kind of get to the bottom of what's really going on for you. And the more that you can understand what's really going on for you, I just think that the better you are as a leader, the happier you are as a leader, the happier people are around you. So it's not, for me, that's not BAU as such. It's how we're reacting to the feedback we're getting about it. I've always thought that's a fundamental thing. Particularly more so these days. Now I coach all the time. I have been coached. I have a better understanding of myself. I just, like I say, for me, I have a happier experience of the world, because I understand that what I'm telling myself isn't necessarily the truth, and that for me gets in the way of so much in our workplaces. It stops so much connection, because we're telling ourselves that someone's difficult. We're telling ourselves that someone's awkward, that they're interpreting what we're saying incorrectly. All they're doing is taking their external stimulus and translating it into something that makes sense for them. And if we can just understand that at a very kind of basic core level, that we're all human. Being human is all we've got these days. Like with AI and technology, being human is the only thing that we've got.
Well, that was Emma Jamil. What stood out to me was how Emma doesn't blame people for struggling. She points to the environments they're actually working in. Because most of the time, you see, it's not that someone can't cope, it's they're being asked to carry far too much with far too little support.
Yeah, and that is especially true for people in HR. And I'm not sure we really think about this enough. You know, they're expected to hold everyone else's emotions while staying neutral and professional, and never really, you know, showing that they're struggling themselves. And when they do reach breaking point, as Emma said, it can be framed as weakness. But if we think about the stress here, it's not just work stress, it's emotional labour, it's vicarious trauma. HR professionals are often on the receiving end of employees' grief or burnout or bullying complaints or mental health crises. All of it has an effect. And actually, according to the British Psychological Society, people in HR often experience secondary trauma symptoms. So things like sleep disruption, heightened anxiety, emotional exhaustion. It's the cost of being that buffer between people and pain. And it does add up very quickly.
Yeah, it's almost like, who is the HR's HR? You know, I think if someone in HR does speak up and say, this is tough, they're often labelled as difficult or too emotional. It's almost like the system asks you to care for everyone else, but punishes you for needing to look after yourself. And this is where training leaders and managers is so, so important. Like Emma said, human is all we've got.
I can't emphasize Emma's point enough. If you're a leader and you don't have a coach, you're missing out on an incredible opportunity in terms of your development, but also in terms of managing your emotional load and your stress levels. Invest in coaching. We'll leave all the links for Emma in the show notes if you want to reach out to her for coaching, or you can get in touch with us as well. Not to mention, if that conversation did hit home for you, if you are in HR or HR adjacent, Emma isn't just talking about change in HR, she's actually building the stage for it. So on the 16th of May this year, so just a few weeks away, she is hosting the HR Big Meet in central London. It's a full day dedicated to amplifying the voices of women in HR, celebrating the profession and giving us all the space to speak honestly about the realities that we're facing. It isn't your typical HR event. Emma calls it the Glastonbury of HR, and honestly, she's not wrong. It's not strategy, decks, policy, all that boring stuff. It's about you, your experience, your voice, and your right to be heard and supported and celebrated in a profession that often expects so much from you, particularly in terms of holding it all together. Tickets are available now at the hrbigmeet.com. They start at £199 if you're booking as a group of 3 or more. And if you're in a position to support somebody else, you can also buy a pay it forward ticket for a woman in HR who might be at work or facing tough circumstances at the moment. Emma and her team will make sure it goes to someone who truly needs it. So to find out more, head to the hrbigmeet.com or connect with Emma Jamil on LinkedIn. Just search Emma Jamil. That's DJEMIL. And of course, all the links are in the show notes.
And just to be clear, that's big meet as in we're meeting someone, not meet as in I'm doing a barbecue.
Yes.
Because, I mean, the Big Meet London does sound like a great event. Get myself around tomahawk steak. Anyway, talking of needing help, this is the world famous weekly workplace surgery time. Yeah, so this is where I put your questions to Leanne. We've got the first one here, which says, why does quitting feel easier than speaking up? So I'm going to read this verbatim. Paul, a trade unionist, often comes across workers who are reluctant to challenge their employers, even when they have little to lose or in a strong position. For example, they might work in a sector which has labour shortages. Despite having little to lose, some of these workers often look to change employer or even change profession rather than challenge the employer. What are the psychological barriers that prevent workers from challenging bad management practice or improving workplace cultures? How do we overcome these barriers both individually and collectively? Lee, this sounds like someone who knows a little bit, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Very good question. And obviously one that we could probably spend 2 hours talking about. But the crux of that question, why does quitting feel easier than speaking up? Because for a lot of people, it just feels safer. When people don't feel that they have power or agency, even if they're working in a sector with staff shortages, speaking up can still feel really risky. You don't want to be seen as that troublemaker. You don't want to get left out, miss out on opportunities. You don't want to be the next person to get pushed out. There's always a chance you won't get another job as quickly. I've heard of some industries having blacklists of employees that they'll pass around. Really? It can be really quite dark out there. There's also a case as well that I think often people will see other people speak up and then have that punishment or they're being ignored, or, you just kind of think, why would I put myself in that position? What's the point? So I don't think it's about confidence or not caring enough. I think it is about that self-preservation. And that is essentially what happens when an organisation doesn't have psychological safety. It's that feeling to have psychological safety is to feel that you can speak honestly at work without being judged or punished. So I think typically the majority of people aren't experiencing psychological safety at work. And the data pretty much shows us that that is the case, largely speaking. I think as well, what might be a case here if we're and again, sweeping generalizations, but if we're talking about sectors that might have high numbers of job vacancies, typically we might see younger workers in these types of roles. And if we think about Gen Z especially, who have come into the workplace during COVID or just after, they haven't had the chance to build relationships. They haven't had the chance to learn those soft skills that help you speak up. We know this is, again, from the research is showing us that this is a skills gap in Gen Z at the moment. So things like setting boundaries, giving feedback, challenging behaviour, having uncomfortable conversations. that skill set isn't very well developed. So again, quitting is just going to feel simpler. So yeah, there's a few broad reasons why. Psychological safety being a main one, and then having the capability and confidence to speak up. It's interesting that you're from a trade union, because I think unions could be a part of this solution, particularly as organisations are getting more and more demanding of people. So like the RTO mandates and the rollbacks on EDI things. This could be a time where unions really come back in. We've seen pay freezes. The problem is many people, especially younger workers, don't really know what unions do. I don't mean that to be disrespectful in any way. It's just a bit of a gap in understanding. So I think it's something like kind of 5 to 7% of workers in the UK in that age group, so kind of under 24, are in a union. That's compared to probably maybe like 25 to 30% who are over 50. So it's a big gap. So we're not looking at a small difference. We're looking at essentially entire 2 generations that have grown up with less understanding of unions, less access to unions, fewer unionized workplaces. I can't tell you how many executives I've worked with whose main achievements have been that they've deunionized their workplace. That was a big push from the private sector over the last 10 to 15 years. So it's not that younger people don't care or they're not into fairness, because they absolutely are. It's just that if unions aren't visible and they're not relatable or aren't present for young people, then it's just not on their radar and they're not going to be able to lean into it. I mean, I think if you are listening and thinking that you're not really sure what trade union does, very simply, trade union is a group of workers who stick together and have each other's back. So fair pay, better conditions, support if something goes wrong at work. You would have famously heard about the junior doctor strike in the UK. That was very much union-led and supported. You might have a union, your workplace might have a union, in which case you can speak to your rep. If not, you can still join one that covers your job or your industry. I will leave a link. There's a government website that has a whole list on them. So quite a long and rambling answer there. But I think in terms of what we could do as older workers to support our young people in speaking up is, one, train your managers so they can provide this psychological safety. They can provide feedback channels for people. Be visible, even just walk, if you're a senior manager, just having a little, if you have an office, having a little walk around, having a cup of tea with people, jumping into the Zoom team meeting, it can really make a difference just to say hello and be a friendly face. I think in terms of unions, if you're a union rep, we need some education here. We need some understanding and myth busting in terms of what unions aren't and are, and how they can support people. And I think just very simply, if we can train our people who might have some of these skills gaps around confidence in terms of communication, and show them the right way to have those difficult conversations, and it could help as well. So there's lots of different reasons there. But I think the bottom line really is that people just don't quite feel safe enough to speak up. As leaders, we need to do better in terms of providing that psychological safety in those feedback channels. And I think for unions, there's a big opportunity in terms of a massive education piece for young people to know they have that support option available to them.
Okay, question number 2, Leanne, and I'm going to apologise to everyone in advance, because I'm going to use some Gen Z language here, and it's going to be so cringy, we'll have to take it offline. Okay, so this person writes, it's no cap, my boss hates how I type. So this person writes, it says, I'm 24, and recently I've noticed my older colleagues, which are Gen X and Boomers, getting increasingly irritated about how I communicate at work. Apparently my emails are too casual, and my Slack messages are incomprehensible. Kind of, I've read some Gen Z stuff and I don't really understand it. Here's the thing. I'm just communicating the way I always do. I send a quick Y instead of typing yes. I use emojis to express tone, and I keep messages super brief because who has the time to write paragraphs? My manager, who's about 45, must seem ancient to you, that's young compared to me, actually pulled me aside last week after I responded to a project request with Now, they've written bet and then they've done the emoji of that kind of emoji.
At the piece.
Yeah. So basically this person, the manager said, can you do this? And they went bet like that. And I would have gone, what? And this manager asked if I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. I literally means I'm going to do it. One of the older guys replied with a formal paragraph asking me to communicate in standard English. Everyone thinks it's funny, but the seriousness is, do I change or should I expect them to change?
Change. They need to check. The thing is, right, I understand this is your preference in terms of communication, but in this context, you're not being understood. Your communication is ineffective. And that is alienating you, causing barriers within your team and making everybody's job harder. So it really doesn't matter if that's your preference. The point is you're not being understood. And this is communication within a work context. I'm sure over time, language will continue to get more and more casual. It has just in the time that I've been working. But being informal is different to being not understood. And I think in this scenario, it's really important that you take on board that feedback that your managers are giving you. And it sounds like they're trying to do it patiently as well. What they call emojis. I understand I use emojis and stuff, but equally we've just had that, what was it called? That Adolescence on Netflix. Emojis don't always mean the same thing to the same people. They can mean very different things.
Yes, exactly. If you're having eggplant for dinner tonight, do not use that emoji.
I was like mind blown. I was texting my friend, hi Alec, being like, this is insane. This is unreal. This is frightening. Who knew kids were having these conversations just via emoji? I still don't really understand the incel thing, but
I don't understand any of it.
I think this is quite simple. Crack on if that's your preference with your friends who understand it. Maybe if you've got some colleagues who find it funny and are interested, teach them a little bit about it. Or maybe you can kind of go put in some little translations if it feels appropriate. So rather than bet, in the little piece, which probably isn't a piece, is it? It's probably calling it something else. But,
probably something really dirty.
Put in brackets like you bet or something like that. You're not being understood, and fundamentally that makes you not very effective at your job and puts you at risk. So
here's a little corollary here. The corollary is not probably the right word, but here's a thought. If this person is listening to you, they might go, yes, but I've been told I can bring my whole self to work, and my whole self is sending emojis. So what would you say to that, Lee?
I think there's a difference between bringing your whole self to work and not being effective. It's your whole self. Yeah, but it's not, we're not saying that you can't be a Gen Z. It's not saying that in conversations you can't say bet or cap and you have a laugh and somebody old like me will go, what does that mean? That's not to say you can't do that, but in written communications, your only aim is to be understood. I don't see how that preference would attack your identity necessarily. Maybe I've got somebody that would be shouting at me for saying that, but I'm not sure that is an attack on your identity. Fundamentally, you're not effectively communicating at work, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's like I think we chat to Luke. Hello, Luke, if you're listening. And Luke's like, no, he won't be. And it's quite often I'll send a huge long message and he'll just reply K, literally the letter K. And I'm like, at first I was like, what the hell? I've just written all this stuff out. But then he pointed out when he saw him last, he was like, no, that's just been going, yeah, cool. Okay, get it. So I think we all need to be a little bit more, we need to be a little bit nicer to each other. But as Leanne says, this is a serious issue that, as they say, AITA, am I the asshole? Yes, you are, perhaps, in this one.
I think, as I said, there's a difference between if you're asked to be overly formal, then I'd be like, yeah, that's really annoying, isn't it? But it's communicating to be understood. Of course, you haven't mentioned that there's any reasons that this might be why you communicate that way. For example, if you've got dyslexia or other kind of challenges with reading and writing, you didn't mention any of that, so I'm going to assume that there's none of that. Should there be, then yes, this is about reasonable adjustments, but there will be other ways to do it rather than ways that are being misunderstood by colleagues. So if there is an element of that, then you should actually absolutely talk to your manager and find some compromises of how to make this work.
Yeah, and you could potentially look at voice notes as well if that is your thing. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Leanne. Question number 3. I've got 30 employees and 0 HR policies. Is this a ticking time bomb? Now, we've had a few similar to this, but I wanted to bring it back because I think that it asks a really interesting question. So our startup is about to hit 30 employees. I'm suddenly panicking about HR. Being honest, we've been flying by the seat of our pants since day one. But last week, someone casually mentioned we might need proper HR policies now, and some of the other staff nodded like this was obvious to everyone but me. Until now, we've managed with a basic employment contract, they said downloaded from the internet, if I'm being honest, and a Google Doc of office guidelines. No one's really updated in months. At what point do we need to start worrying about formal HR processes and workplace culture? Do we need a proper HR person?
Yes. No.
Well,
no. You
yes.
need proper HR policies. At what point do you need to start thinking about HR? When you make your first hire? When you have employee number 1? You need to be thinking about these things. There's legal obligations you have to do as a lawyer in terms of certain policies and ways of working and health and safety. And there's so many things that HR does and the policies that you need to protect yourself and protect your people. In terms of do you need an HR person? Not necessarily, no. I think if you're really starting from scratch on this, I think it would be a big ask to try and hand this off to like an ops director, which we see quite typically. My thought would be just talk to an outsourced HR company like Curve Group that we spoke to the other day. Who else have we spoke to? Charlie HR?
Charlie HR, yeah. That's a self-serve platform. It's I think it's about 40 quid a month or something. It's not expensive.
Yeah, there's loads out there. They're varying approaches and intensity and quality and price. But yeah, that would be my first thought because you're going to probably need, and I think really probably an outsource. My leaning would be to an outsource. 30 people is quite a large team at this point. It sounds like you're continuing to grow. My thought would be if you can engage an outsourced HR team, they're going to put all of this in place for you. They're going to put all the lovely frameworks and the bones of it in. It might be that you need that intensity for a short time and then you can manage it yourself with something else. But that would be my thought because there's going to be everything from equality to recruitment to holiday policy to flexible working. There's so many new laws that have just come in as well in terms of all that. There's going to be maternity and paternity and health and safety. And oh my gosh, there's so many. I'd be very sigh of relief that nothing has happened that you could be liable for and in a very tricky situation. And get onto an outsourced HR function like now. Like stop this and go do it now.
Yeah, we'll wait. Yeah, just pause the podcast. Go and do that. I think there's sometimes a lot of people confuse the idea of chief people officer and chief HR officer. So I think it might be useful just for you to clarify. They need an HR person, but do they necessarily need a workplace culture specialist like you right now?
Yes, I would say if your organisation is probably hitting like 15 to 20 plus, then yeah, it's always worth starting to look at things around the processes we use to recruit people, the processes that we use to engage people and to train people. But you're going to know if that's a problem if you have a high turnover, struggling to get talent in, if it takes you ages to fill an empty role, if you've got people going off sick, there's going to be signs like this that shows it's probably time to think about more of kind of a strategy side in terms of people and culture. What we're actually talking about here is human resources. And I think at this point, the urgency is around the actual legal obligations you have as an employer in terms of systems, processes, structures within your organization. So get that right first. And then we might want to talk about people and culture.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And I hope that was useful. Sorry, I got itchy ear. Hope that was, that's only the people on YouTube are going to see me scratching my ear. I could have kept that quiet. So I hope that was useful. If you have a question that you want me to put to Leanne, then all the notes, all the things are in the show notes, the links and stuff and the emails and all that. We never had a voice note before. That would be cool.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if you can record it. If you do want to do that, just email us and I'll give you my WhatsApp number. And then
you can do it on LinkedIn. We send voice notes on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'd rather that than giving some random WhatsApp
some number. Random listener, my telephone number. Rude.
Yeah. Sorry about that. No, you're not random. You're beautiful. You're all beautiful. So that is everything for this week. Join us next Tuesday for another edition of This Week in Work. And as I've said before, keep looking at our YouTube channel. We're starting to mess around with it a little bit more. Well, actually, I say we. Leanne is. We've been doing it for about 2 years, putting the video podcast on the YouTube channel. Not got huge amounts of traction, and I understand, because if you don't know who we are, you're not going to suddenly sit and watch 45 minutes of us. But Leanne's been cutting down the little bits and, the surgery questions and all that. Starting to get a little bit of traction there. Would love your feedback. If you think it's rubbish, tell us.
Yeah, tell us. If you like hearing stories about how people are doing really cool things, you'll like our Thursday episodes. That's where we interview some pretty cool people. This week, we have James Hawkins, co-founder of PostHog, who's challenging everything we think we know about team structures. James believes small teams of no more than 6 people who have complete autonomy are the secret to happy and productive workplaces.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, James started in the famous Y Combinator, which if you look at the alumni of the Y Combinator, oh my goodness, there's just the biggest companies in the world come through Y. So in PostHog, there are no hierarchy, there's no politics, no middle managers, and team leads don't even get paid anymore. I mean, it does sound chaotic, but they're scaling rapidly, going from 80 to 190 people this year alone. So is this the future of work, or is this just startup madness? We'll find out.
We will find out. Join us on Thursday. And yeah, we'll unpack it. We'll circle back. We'll make sure we stay in our swim lane and no cap. It'll all be fine.
Now, you're welcome, listeners, to take this offline now. We're going to go. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And spoiler alert.
And we're going to start off with one we've got here.
As opposed to one we've got over there.
Yes. That was such a weak segue. Okay.